All right, let's dive straight into this explainer with a forensic breakdown of the Chernobyl disaster. But actually, we're not starting in Ukraine. We are starting in a Swedish power plant on April 28, 1986. A plant worker named Cliff Robinson was just going about his business, walking through routine radiation detectors like he get every single day, when suddenly the alarm starts screaming. There were sky-high levels of radioactive particles right there on his boots. Now, at first, the Swedish engineers completely panicked. They naturally assumed their own facility was leaking. But after frantically testing the air, the soil, and the trees outside, they realized something far, far more terrifying. That radiation, it wasn't coming from inside their station at all. It was literally riding the wind from over 1,100 kilometers away, blowing in from deep inside the Soviet Union. To put that into perspective, for more than 50 hours, the Soviet government had somehow managed to keep the world's worst nuclear disaster an absolute secret. But here's the thing about a massive invisible cloud of radiation sweeping across Ukraine, Belarus, Scandinavia, and right into Western Europe, you simply cannot hide it. Back at a place called Chernobyl, an atomic reactor had blown its lid completely off, releasing over 400 times more radiation than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Which brings us to the core mystery we need to unpack. How on earth did a state-of-the-art power plant, operated by some of the most elite scientists in the world, just destroy itself in a fraction of a second? Was it just pure human error? Was it a cheap design secret that the government deliberately hid from its own engineers? Or was it a fatal, perfectly timed combination of both? Today, we are stripping away the myths and the propaganda to go minute by minute inside Control Room 4. Now, to really wrap our heads around the nightmare of Chernobyl, we first have to understand the dream of Pripyat. This was a booming, vibrant city of about 50,000 people, sitting just 3 kilometers from the power plant. And get this, the average age there was remarkably young, just 26 years old. Pripyat was literally designated the city of the future. Because while other parts of the Soviet Union were suffering through brutal lines for basic groceries, Pripyat was totally stocked with fresh meat, imported fruits, sports complexes, and even a brand new amusement park. It was this thriving utopia built entirely around what they proudly called the peaceful atom. The state essentially assured everyone that nuclear energy was so unbelievably safe, you could put a reactor under your bed and sleep soundly. So, how did this peaceful atom actually work? Let's quickly break down the nuclear physics into something we can all visualize. Think of a nuclear plant as a giant, wildly high-tech tea kettle. Step 1. At the core, you have radioactive fuel rods packed with uranium-235. As those atoms split apart, they generate a massive amount of heat. Step 2. You pump cold water through that core, and the extreme heat boils the water into steam. Step 3. That high-pressure steam spins these giant fan blades called a turbine. Step 4. This spinning turbine powers a generator to pump out electricity. And finally, Step 5, which is absolutely crucial, the brakes. To control all that heat, you lower these long rods made of boron down into the core. Boron basically soaks up radiation and slows down the reaction. You push the brakes in, the reactor cools down. You pull them out, it heats up. Pretty simple, right? Well, here is where things go completely off the rails. We need to talk about the first secret engineering flaw of the Soviet RBMK reactor design, something called the positive void coefficient. In most Western nuclear plants at the time, if the water somehow boiled away or turned into steam bubbles, which engineers call voids, the reactor would just naturally slow down and stop. It actually needed liquid water to keep the reaction going. But in the Soviet RBMK, it was the exact opposite. Steam actually accelerated the nuclear reaction. More steam bubbles meant more heat, which made more steam, which made even more heat. It's literally like driving a car where pressing the brake pedal accidentally stomps on the gas instead. And that brings us to the second fatal flaw. Remember those boron control rods that are supposed to act as the brakes? Well, to save a few bucks, the Soviets tipped the very bottom ends of these rods with a material called graphite. And graphite doesn't slow down nuclear reactions, it actively speeds them up. So, if you were to push those control rods back down into the reactor, for the first few seconds, those graphite tips are entering the core first. Imagine pressing the brakes in your car to avoid a massive crash, but having your vehicle violently accelerate for 3 full seconds before the brakes actually kick in. Now, on paper, if everything was kept perfectly balanced by the operators, these hidden flaws weren't supposed to be a problem. But on the night of April 25, 1986, that delicate balance was entirely lost. The plant was scheduled for a totally routine safety test to see if the spinning turbines could generate enough temporary emergency power to run water pumps during a blackout. It was supposed to happen during the day, manned by highly trained daytime operators. But an unexpected phone call from the regional power grid manager in Kiev demanded they keep supplying power to the city, which led to a massive 10-hour delay. And running the reactor at that low power for hours caused a chemical byproduct called xenon-135 to build up deep inside the core. Xenon acts basically like nuclear ash, or like throwing wet wood on a campfire. It completely smothers the nuclear reaction. By the time they were finally cleared to proceed, the experienced day shift was gone, and an unprepared night shift was left holding the bag with a deeply poisoned, incredibly unstable reactor. Midnight strikes and the ticking clock begins. The night shift arrives, including 25-year-old Leonid Toptunov and ship supervisor Alexander Akimov, and they are being heavily pressured by the strict deputy chief engineer, a guy named Anatoly Jotlov. At 12:28 a.m., as they try to lower the power for the test, that hidden buildup of xenon ash causes the power to just completely crash, plummeting to a dangerously low 30 megawatts. The reactor is essentially stalling out. Standard safety protocols demanded an immediate shutdown right then and there. But Jotlov flat out refused, threatening the young operators' careers if they didn't push forward. At 1 a.m., desperate to boost the power back up and fight through that smothering xenon, Toptunov starts pulling out the control rods. By 1:22 a.m., out of 211 control rods, only 6 to 8 remain in the core. The safety systems are completely bypassed. The brakes are off. At 1:23 a.m., they begin the fatal test, cutting the steam supply to the turbines, which immediately causes the cooling water to boil into steam. A runaway feedback loop had just triggered inside the core. That positive void coefficient we talked about earlier was now accelerating the heat exponentially. Warning alarms are flashing wildly. Realizing the reactor was surging totally out of control, Alexander Akimov reaches for the ultimate emergency panic switch on the console, the AZ5 button. Pressing this was supposed to drop all 211 control rods back into the reactor at once to instantly kill the reaction. But he was entirely unaware of that second secret flaw. As the rods fell, all 211 of those graphite tips entered the active zone simultaneously. The extreme heat immediately melted the channels, jamming the control rods in place when they were only 1/3 of the way down. In a fraction of a second, the energy in the core surged to an unfathomable 33,000 megawatts. That is more than 10 times the reactor's maximum safe operational capacity. The water instantly flashed into superheated steam. At 1:23 and 45 seconds a.m., a massive steam explosion lifted the 1,000-ton concrete and steel upper roof right off the top of the reactor like it was just a bottle cap. 2 seconds later, oxygen rushed into the exposed white-hot nuclear core, igniting a massive hydrogen explosion. A brilliant, terrifying beam of bluish-purple ionized air shot straight up into the night sky. The worst nuclear accident in human history had just occurred. Meanwhile, inside the control room, amidst falling ceilings and flooded floors, the men in charge retreated into absolute total denial. Anatoly Jotlov literally walked outside, saw burning chunks of reactor graphite on the ground, and still refused to believe the unthinkable had happened. Because in Soviet nuclear science, an RBMK reactor exploding was supposed to be physically impossible. When the small dosimeters they had on hand maxed out at their absolute limit of 3.6 row engines per hour, the plant management famously and tragically assumed 3.6 row engines, not great, but not terrible. This delusion created a truly tragic gap between reality and leadership. Think about this. While those broken meters maxed out at 3.6, the actual radiation levels near the shattered core were over 15,000 roentgens per hour. To put that into perspective, a lethal human dose is around 400 to 500. This meant that standing near that open core delivered a fatal, completely inescapable dose of radiation in less than 60 seconds. Yet, for hours, the plant directors were sending falsely reassuring reports to Moscow, claiming the reactor was perfectly intact, while innocent operators were being sent to walk right into instantly fatal environments. We absolutely have to talk about the unsung heroes of this disaster, the people who literally stepped directly into an invisible fire. The plant's fire brigade arrived to fight what they were told was just a standard roof fire, handling white-hot radioactive debris with bare-gloved hands to stop the flames from spreading to the other reactors. Days later, 3 incredibly brave engineers, Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bizpalov, and Boris Baranov, volunteered to dive into pitch-black, chest-deep radioactive water in the basement to manually turn valves and drain the pools. Why? Because that prevented the melting core from hitting the water and triggering a second thermonuclear blast that could have rendered half of Europe uninhabitable. And beneath the plant, over 400 coal miners worked 24 hours a day in suffocating 122-degree Fahrenheit heat, often completely naked in the pitch dark, digging a tunnel to build a massive cooling plate under the reactor to protect the entire region's groundwater. By late 1986, the cleanup effort meant they needed to build a massive concrete dome over the open reactor. But first, they had to clear the roof of Reactor 3, which was completely covered in chunks of ultra-deadly graphite. Initially, they tried using high-tech, remote-controlled robots imported from Germany and Japan. But the radiation was so extreme, over 7,000 rotons per hour, that the electronic brains of these machines just fried within minutes. So when the machines failed, the Soviets drafted human beings, chillingly referring to them as biorobots. Young soldiers wearing homemade lead aprons were given very simple, terrifying orders. Run out onto the roof, grab a shovel, scoop up a chunk of graphite, throw it into the core, and run back inside immediately. Because of those staggering radiation levels, their shifts could last no more than exactly 90 seconds. A bell would ring, a soldier would charge out, shovel fiercely for just a minute and a half, and sprint back to safety. Many of these young men absorbed an entire lifetime limit of radiation during these desperate, single, 90-second sprints. But thanks to these human biorobots, the roof was finally cleared, allowing the protective sarcophagus to eventually be built. But while these liquidators were out there sacrificing their lives, the state was busy prioritizing its image over public safety. For nearly 3 days, the citizens of Pripyat were told absolutely nothing. Children were outside playing in the falling radioactive ash, literally calling it warm snow. It wasn't until 36 hours after the explosion that the 50,000 residents were finally told to pack their bags for what they were assured was just a temporary 3-day evacuation. They left their entire lives behind and never returned. Had the government just been honest and immediately issued iodine pills, thousands of future cases of thyroid cancer in children could have been prevented. It's truly heartbreaking. The Soviet government desperately needed a scapegoat to hide the truth about their cheap reactor designs. So they put the surviving plant operators on trial and convicted them. But Valery Legasov, the brilliant Soviet chemist who actually led the scientific investigation, fought fiercely to uncover the truth. He realized that while human error was definitely half the story, it was the reactor's secret design flaws that made the explosion truly inevitable. Shunned by the entire Soviet establishment for trying to force safety upgrades, Legasov tragically took his own life exactly 2 years and 1 day after the disaster. But his legacy survived. The secret tapes he recorded before his death circulated widely, ultimately forcing the government to admit the truth and retrofit all remaining RBMK reactors so another Chernobyl could never ever happen again. Believe it or not, even today, official Soviet statistics still bizarrely claim that only 31 people died directly from the disaster. However, independent estimates from the World Health Organization and environmental agencies place the long-term death toll from radiation-induced cancers and illnesses anywhere from 4,000 to over 90,000 deaths. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, inside the 30-kilometer exclusion zone where humans completely abandoned the land, nature has ironically reclaimed it. Today, it is transformed into one of Europe's largest wildlife sanctuaries. You've got wolves, bears, and rare wild horses roaming freely right through the ruins of Pripyat. Ultimately, we are left with an incredibly powerful reflection. You see, Chernobyl wasn't just a simple mistake made by some tired operators on a night shift. And it wasn't just an engineering flaw on a blueprint. It was a disaster created by an entire system that put pride, speed, and cost-cutting way ahead of safety and truth. When organizations hide their mistakes just to protect their reputations, those mistakes multiply until they violently explode. Which leaves us with this final vital thought. What happens when institutions prioritize pride and secrecy over truth in our modern world? The ruined walls of Reactor 4 still stand today as a timeless, haunting reminder that science requires absolute honesty, and the true cost of lies is ultimately paid in human lives.
Please like and subscribe.